Welcome back to the shop here at Basin Motorsports. I'm Canaan. Today we're going to talk about the basics of what you need for tooling concerning doing upholstery. Now, one of the questions I see a lot from people is that they want to do some basic upholstery, but they don't know what tools to buy. So we're going to go through a list. These are my personal recommendations, and always remember the things I talk about typically have a link down in the video description. So if you need something, you can go right out and go ahead and purchase it. So I think the first thing we can quickly talk about are measuring devices. These are the things I have here in the shop that I use and what I do recommend. Now, when it comes to measuring tools, there's really no right or wrong answer. There are many options out there. Of course, you're going to deal with large fabric. You're going to have some rolls that are up to 50 inches, 60 inches, depending on what it is. So you probably want to have longer rulers or measuring pieces. Now, this one here is a 48 inch. I've got my finger on. This one is a 40. The difference, obviously, other than a little bit of length, there is a different width, 1 inch width, 2 inch width. You've also got a T-square you can use. This is a carpenter's T-square. It's a 48 inch. You have your standard 12 inch ruler you can use to mark things with. And then you can go into things like a simple tape measure. You can use a fabric tape measure. And then, depending on what you're doing, you may need to measure things that are round or screws or anything else. You can always get yourself a set of calipers. Now, again, with calipers, there are multiple different versions. You have a dial indicator caliper, you have a slide caliper here, or you could do a digital. These are really just depending on what you need, but these are all the ones I have here in the shop that I used for material. All right, so next we're going to talk about cutting utensils. Now, most of the time you're going to use things like scissors, but there are times that you may have to, let's say in case of making a flat door panel, you may need things like drill bits or titanium bits. Now, of course, there's a lot of different scissor options available. You have some smaller ones, you have some nippers, you have some general scissors, and then you have some true dedicated upholstery scissors. A lot of times you're going to be cutting things possibly at your sewing machine. You can use these little nippers just to cut thread. Pretty simple. You can use smaller ones. These can cut cardboard or paper or anything else as you're making your templates. And then you're going to have some upholstery scissors or upholstery shears that are going to cut through your fabric. Now, just remember that cardboard tends to dull the surface or the cutting surface of your scissors. So anything you use for cardboard, let's say you pick your orange ones for cardboard, you're going to keep those away from using your cloth. Anything that cuts your cloth, like these shears here, you're going to keep those dedicated just for cloth. As far as your drill bits, I like these. These titanium ones are usually pretty simple. They're pretty cheap. You can pick up locally. And of course, you have drill bits if you need something precision. These are pretty much cutting or drilling. And of course, there's a plethora of other things you have out there. But these simple things will work. Now, I'll add on top of that a razor knife. I do like these ones that go in and out. That's for a safety piece. And then you have different blades. You obviously see this one has a longer angle blade here in comparison to the one next to it with a different angle. It's a 45 versus a 30. And just to mention, you're probably going to use a lot of different pens to mark things. So you've got a thin Sharpie, you've got a fat Sharpie, you have a chalk pen. Some people like just chalk period. This is a water-soluble chalk pen or just a regular pen. Any of these work for marking for your cutting, but these are simple things you can have around the shop, make things easier. So next we'll jump into patterns that you can use to design. Of course, you obviously have your straight lines I showed you with your rulers, but there are things out there you can design and 3D print, or you can buy through local merchants or online. Now, these are some of the things that I have 3D printed, and some of these have been free downloads. All the stuff in silver has been free downloads off the internet. And then these circles are just something simple based on the diameter of them, and then they are 3D printed here in the shop. So again, these are 3D circles. This is a large curve. This is a small French curve. And then you have some different curves here that you can use for patterns as you want. Now, when you hold down your fabric, a lot of times when you're cutting it or you're tracing pattern, etc., you need something to hold them down. So this was a 1.5 inch wide by 36 inch long piece of bar stock. Just cut 6 pieces out of it, so they're 6 inches long, 1.5 inch wide, and each one has a nice little weight. Now, these are pretty simple, but I've also seen some great ideas. I've seen people use some old steam irons that are probably somewhere in this range, maybe the size of a big potato, and they do very well. They're obviously flat on the bottom because they're an iron, but they are very heavy, so they do great things there. And I've seen people use those for patterns too. So it doesn't matter how you want to do it. The creativity is really up to you, but these are some of the ones I have that are in the shop that I use commonly. All right, so let's get to the point of attaching material together. The sewing machine is probably something that you're going to dread purchasing on the top end or the beginning because it's pretty expensive as far as a tool, but it may be one of the most useful things you'll have for doing sewing. Now, I won't talk about whether you should do used or new. That is totally a personal preference. I bought new, and I am very thankful for that because I wanted something straight out of the box that worked. Now, if you watched the channel previously, you know that I have an NC6 sewing machine from NC Carpet and Binding, but there are great brands out there beyond the NC series. You're going to see a lot of recommendations for a Consew brand, Pfaff, a Juki, and some people find some used ones that are Brother or Singer, etc. If you're going to be doing some heavy upholstery, whether it's marine, outdoor, like an ATV, a golf cart, motorcycle, or any of those, you're going to want an industrial walking foot sewing machine. Now, outside of the sewing machine, which can be a whole other discussion, there are certain attachment features beyond that, or attachment items you can do. One of the ones is I like these small 2-inch clamps. These are pretty handy for holding material together, whether it's gluing, sewing, etc. These things do pretty awesome. And then otherwise, I would just use a stapler. If you want something that's a little more permanent than these clips, or maybe these are too big to use, just go ahead and use yourself a little swing line stapler or something like that, that you can just kind of staple all the edges together. And then once you've sewn, you take the staples back out like it was never there. Now, beyond that, there are some that will do some hand sewing. So you may want to get some hand sewing needles. Those can vary based on size and the tip and what thread you're going to be using. But that's really kind of a personal preference of whether you want to hand sew or always do machine sewing. All right, so let's quickly touch on adhesives or attachment items beyond that. Now, for some jobs, you may want to have a spray adhesive, whether it's going to be an air gun and compressor for something like a Wellwood Landau. You can get those in gallons or 5 gallons. Put them in it like a primer gun with a larger tip used by compressor. Sometimes you may want a spray contact adhesive, something like this. There are other brands out there, but this will temporarily attach things together, make it better for sewing, or you can get something a lot more permanent, like a high temperature from the Keystone Brothers. Again, the link will be down in the description, but that will be more of a permanent bond that will hold up through temperature or a heavy duty application versus something like this from the Gorilla Glue. This is just something you can always just use as a temporary to hold pieces together while you're putting it together. Now, beyond the sewing, a lot of times you're going to use some hog ring pliers. So again, pretty cheap to buy. You can get just a pair of pliers. You can get a small thing of hog rings, or you can get a large bunch of hog rings together. Those are pretty good for putting, obviously, material attaching it to springs or seat frames or anything else. The last thing I'm going to share with you is something that's more a personal thing that I like to do. And that is having odd tools like a 3D printer and design software to kind of elevate your level above. This is not really a basic thing, and I'll just throw it in there quickly because it can be applicable, and this and other tools like a welder, a bandsaw, bench grinder, drill press, any of those, probably not your basic stuff you're going to have in the beginning, but they're nice to have. All right, so that is my exhaustive basic list of things I think you should have in your shop or your garage or your back bedroom if you're going to try to do some upholstery. Now, if I missed anything off the list, be sure to leave them down in the comment section below. If you have any recommendations of products that I missed or brands that you really do like, you think beginners should investigate, go ahead and leave those down below. Like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends that are trying to get into upholstery. And that's it for this time from Basin Motorsports. And just remember, keep things like this organized in the background. These things are pretty cheap to purchase, but it's nice to know where all your tools are. Some of that's 3D printed, some of it is purchased from the store. Otherwise, everything is handy and organized, and I don't ever lose it. We'll see you next time.